The old woman is finally gone. I sold the farm. We're spending it all in Europe, DIL said, throwing bags in the car. I just waved and said, enjoy the trip. When their card got declined at the first designer store, my phone rang 30 times. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Roger, and at 63 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. Real betrayal doesn't come from strangers or business partners. It comes from the people you welcome into your family, the ones you trust with your legacy, the ones who smile at your dinner table while planning to take everything you've built. It was a Tuesday morning in October when I discovered that my daughter-in-law Bella was planning to sell my farm. Not after I died, mind you, while I was still very much alive, still working the land my grandfather had passed down to me, still believing that family meant something. I was coming back from the barn when I heard her voice drifting from the kitchen window. The tone stopped me cold. It wasn't the sweet, respectful voice she used when I was around. This was different. Calculating. Cold. Listen, Sarah, the old man won't be around forever, she was saying into her phone. I pressed myself against the side of the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. Walter's too sentimental to see it, but this place is sitting on a gold mine. 300 acres of prime farmland. We're talking millions. My breath caught. This was my home. The place where I'd raised Walter after his mother died, where I'd taught him to ride a horse, to fix a tractor, to understand that land isn't just property, it's responsibility. It's legacy. The trick is making Walter think it's his idea, Bella continued, her laugh sharp and ugly. I've been dropping hints about how hard it is for Roger to maintain this place at his age. Poor old thing can barely climb the stairs without getting winded. That was a lie. I'd been working this land for 40 years. My knees might creak a little in the morning, and maybe I moved a bit slower than I used to, but I was nowhere near ready to give up. The farm was my life, my purpose, my connection to generations of family who'd worked this same soil. Once I convince Walter that Roger needs to be in one of those nice assisted living places, the rest will be easy, Bella said. I already found a buyer who's interested. He's willing to pay $4.5 million for the whole property. $4.5 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was more money than I'd ever imagined this place was worth. More than enough to tempt a young woman who'd grown up in the city, who'd never understood why anyone would choose dirt under their fingernails over designer handbags. Walter still thinks we're broke from the wedding expenses, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow seemed more sinister. He has no idea about the credit card debt I've been hiding, $28,000 and climbing. This farm sale would solve everything. $28,000. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. Walter worked so hard, putting in extra hours at the construction company to keep up with what he thought were normal household expenses. He had no idea his wife was spending money they didn't have, living a lifestyle they couldn't afford. The best part is, Roger trusts me completely, Bella said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Yesterday he was showing me all the paperwork for the property, explaining how everything would go to Walter someday. Sweet old fool has no idea I'm documenting everything for the sale. My hands clenched into fists. Those documents were family treasures, deeds dating back to 1892, when my great-grandfather first bought this land. Tax records showing decades of careful stewardship. Insurance papers proving this place had survived floods, droughts, and economic downturns that had destroyed other farms. I'd shown them to Bella because I wanted her to understand the weight of what Walter would inherit someday. I wanted her to see that this wasn't just property, it was history, heritage, the foundation of everything our family had built. Instead, she'd been taking notes for a real estate transaction. Roger keeps talking about teaching Walter more about farm management, Bella laughed, as if either of them have any business sense. This place loses money every year. The smart thing is to cash out while land prices are high. That stung more than anything else she'd said. Yes, farming was hard. Yes, some years were better than others. But this land provided more than just income. It provided purpose, stability, connection to something larger than ourselves. Things Bella would never understand because she measured everything in dollars and cents. I need to be careful about timing, she continued. If I push too hard too fast, Walter might get suspicious. But I'm thinking by Christmas we could have Roger settled somewhere nice, and by spring we'd be free to travel. I've already been looking at properties in Europe. With $4 million we could buy a villa in Tuscany. Europe. Tuscany. While I rotted away in some sterile facility, forgotten and abandoned, she wanted to live like a queen on the sale of my family's legacy. The key is making Roger think it's for his own good, Bella said. I've already started mentioning how isolated he is out here, how it would be safer for him to be around medical professionals. Walter's starting to worry about his father's health, which is perfect. My health was fine, better than fine actually. Dr. Martinez had told me just last month that I had the blood pressure of a man 20 years younger. My only real health issue was the arthritis in my left knee, and even that didn't slow me down much. But I could see how Bella's subtle comments might plant seeds of doubt in Walter's mind. My son loved me, worried about me. If Bella convinced him that keeping me on the farm was actually dangerous for my health, Walter might agree to the sale out of genuine concern for my welfare. I have to go, Bella said suddenly. Walter's truck just pulled in. Remember, not a word about this to anyone. The less people know about our plans, the better. I heard the kitchen door slam and forced myself to start walking normally toward the house, as if I'd just finished my morning chores. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just learned. My daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into my family, who called me Dad with what I thought was genuine affection, was planning to steal my life's work. Walter came through the front door just as I entered the kitchen. He looked tired, his work clothes dusty, his face showing the strain of trying to provide for a wife whose spending habits were apparently spiraling out of control. "Morning, Dad," he said, kissing Bella on the cheek. She smiled up at him, the picture of loving devotion. If I hadn't just heard her true plans, I might have believed the act myself. "How was work, honey?" she asked, her voice warm and caring. "You look exhausted." "Big project deadline coming up," Walter replied, slumping into a chair. "Mr. Henderson wants the whole subdivision framed before the weather turns. It's good money, but the hours are killing me." I watched Bella's face carefully. She nodded sympathetically, but I caught the flash of calculation in her eyes. More work for Walter meant less time for him to pay attention to what was happening at home. Less chance he'd notice her manipulations. "You work too hard," she said, rubbing his shoulders. "Maybe it's time to think about other options." There it was. The beginning of her campaign. "Other options?" Walter asked. "Well," Bella said carefully, glancing at me before continuing. "I've been thinking about what we discussed. About your father." My blood ran cold. They'd already been discussing me behind my back. "What about Dad?" Walter asked, but his tone had changed slightly. There was something defensive in it, as if he was prepared to argue. "It's just that this place is so big, so isolated," Bella said. "What if something happened to him out here? What if he fell or had a medical emergency? By the time anyone found him, it could be too late." Walter looked at me with new eyes, and I could see the worry Bella had planted beginning to take root. "Dad's been fine," he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Of course he has," Bella said quickly. "I'm not saying he can't take care of himself. I just think we should consider his safety, his happiness. There are some beautiful retirement communities now, places where he'd have people his own age to talk to, activities, medical care right on site." The trap was being set with surgical precision. Every word designed to sound like concern while building a case for removing me from my own home. Walter rubbed his forehead, clearly torn between loyalty to me and what his wife was presenting as responsible planning. "I don't know, Bella. This farm means everything to Dad." "I know it does," she said, her voice soft and understanding. "And that's exactly why this is so hard. But sometimes loving someone means making difficult decisions for their own good." I wanted to speak up, to defend myself, to expose her lies right then and there. But something held me back. Maybe it was the shock of learning how deep her deception went. Maybe it was the realization that if I confronted her now, she'd just find another way to achieve her goals. Or maybe it was something deeper. A growing understanding that if I was going to protect my legacy and save my son from this woman, I needed to be smarter than she was. I needed to play her game better than she could play it herself. So I kept quiet and listened as my daughter-in-law continued to weave her web of lies, all while planning exactly how I was going to turn her own deception against her. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life, but not for the reasons Bella thought. Watching my son being manipulated by the woman he loved was like watching a slow-motion car accident. I wanted to grab Walter by the shoulders and shake him awake, but I knew that wouldn't work. Bella had been too clever, too patient in her approach. Instead, I decided to give her exactly what she thought she wanted. A confused, helpless old man who needed to be managed and eventually moved aside. It started small. I began forgetting where I put my keys, asking Walter the same question twice in one conversation, leaving the water running in the kitchen sink. Nothing dramatic enough to suggest serious cognitive decline, just enough to plant seeds of concern. Bella noticed immediately, of course. She pounced on every small mistake like a cat on a wounded bird. "Walter, honey, did you see how your father struggled to remember Mrs. Patterson's name yesterday?" she said over dinner one evening. "He's known her for 30 years. I had deliberately paused when greeting our neighbor, pretending to search for her name while she stood at our front gate. Mrs. Patterson had looked concerned, reaching out to touch my arm gently. "Are you feeling all right, Roger?" she'd asked. The worry in her voice had made my chest tight with guilt, but I'd pressed on with the charade. "Dad's always been a little forgetful," Walter said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "This is different," Bella insisted. "And yesterday I found him standing in the barn, just staring at the wall. When I asked what he was doing, he seemed confused, like he'd forgotten why he went in there." That particular performance had been especially difficult. Standing motionless in my own barn, pretending to be lost in the space where I'd worked every day for decades, had felt like betraying everything I was, but I'd seen how Bella's eyes lit up when she found me there. Saw her immediately pull out her phone to make notes. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Martinez," Walter said quietly. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Bella replied, and I didn't miss the satisfaction in her voice. "Just to be safe. You know how much I love your father. I want what's best for him." The lies came so easily to her. Watching her manipulate my son's genuine concern for my welfare was nauseating, but it also revealed just how calculated her entire approach had been. This wasn't opportunistic greed. This was a long-term strategy, executed with cold precision. Over the following days, I increased the frequency of my episodes. I left the stove on after making coffee. I asked Walter when his mother was coming home, knowing full well that Mary had been dead for 15 years. I wandered into rooms and stood there looking confused until someone found me. Each incident was carefully calibrated, serious enough to build a pattern, but not so dramatic that Walter would rush me to the emergency room. I needed Bella to feel confident that her plan was working, that I was becoming exactly the burden she wanted me to be. The hardest part was watching Walter's face during these moments. My son's love for me was written in every worried glance, every gentle redirection when I pretended to be confused. He started staying home from work more often, checking on me throughout the day, treating me like fragile glass that might shatter at any moment. "Dad, are you sure you're feeling okay?" he asked one morning after I'd spent 10 minutes pretending to look for my coffee cup while holding it in my hand. "I'm fine, son," I said, letting my voice sound a little more uncertain than usual. "Just tired, I guess." Bella appeared in the doorway, still in her silk robe, holding her own coffee like a prop. "Maybe you should rest more, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This place is so demanding. All these chores, all this responsibility." She'd started calling me Dad more frequently, I noticed. Each use of the word felt like another layer of manipulation, designed to make Walter see her as the devoted daughter-in-law who only wanted what was best for the family. "I've been thinking," she continued, settling into the chair beside Walter. "Maybe we should look into some of those retirement communities I mentioned, just to see what's available. There's no pressure, of course, but it might be good to have options." Walter looked at me with such pain in his eyes that I almost broke character right then. He was torn between wanting to protect me and feeling like he was betraying me by even considering the idea of moving me out of my own home. "I don't want to leave the farm," I said, letting my voice waver slightly. "This is my home." "Of course it is," Bella said soothingly. "And no one's talking about making any decisions, right? Now, we just want to explore all our options to make sure you have the best possible care." Care. The word made me want to laugh bitterly. The only thing Bella cared about was the $4.5 million she thought my property would bring. That afternoon, while Walter was at work, I decided to test just how far Bella was willing to go. I called her into my study, where I kept all the important farm documents. "Bella, honey," I said, making my voice sound confused and slightly panicked. "I can't find the deed to the south pasture. I had it right here yesterday." Her eyes sharpened with interest. "The deed? Are you sure you put it in your desk?" "I thought I did, but—" I let my voice trail off, rubbing my forehead as if trying to remember. "There are so many papers, I can't keep track anymore." "Let me help you look," she said, moving toward the filing cabinet with barely concealed eagerness. For the next hour I watched as Bella systematically went through every document in my study, ostensibly helping me find the missing deed. In reality, she was cataloging every piece of paperwork related to the farm's ownership, taking pictures with her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. "Here it is," I said eventually, pulling the deed from a folder where I'd hidden it earlier. I must have moved it and forgotten. "Thank goodness," Bella said, but I saw her slip her phone back into her pocket. "You know, Dad, maybe it would help if we organized all these papers better, put them somewhere safe where you won't worry about losing them." "That's very thoughtful of you," I replied while thinking about how convenient it would be for her to have all the ownership documents in one easily accessible location. "I could even help you make copies of everything," she continued, "just in case. You know how important these papers are." Of course she wanted copies. I nodded gratefully, playing the role of the confused old man who didn't understand that he was being set up for the biggest theft of his life. That evening, Bella showed Walter a brochure for Sunset Manor, a luxury-assisted living facility about an hour away. The photographs showed smiling elderly people playing cards, gardening in raised beds, participating in art classes. "Look how happy everyone seems," she said, spreading the glossy pages across the kitchen table. "And they have a full medical staff, 24-hour nursing care, even a chef who specializes in heart-healthy meals." Walter picked up one of the brochures, studying the pictures with a frown. "It looks nice, but Dad's not an invalid. He doesn't need nursing care." "Not yet," Bella said gently. "But wouldn't it be better to plan ahead, to make sure he's somewhere safe before something serious happens?" She'd thought of everything. The facility she'd chosen was expensive enough that maintaining it would require selling the farm. Beautiful enough that Walter might convince himself it was actually an upgrade from our simple farmhouse. Far enough away that I'd be effectively cut off from everything I knew, but close enough that Walter could visit regularly without feeling too guilty. "The waiting list is quite long," Bella continued, producing another set of papers. "But they have an opening coming up in February. We'd need to put down a deposit to hold the spot." February, just 4 months away. She was moving faster than I'd expected. Walter looked at me across the table, his face full of conflict. "What do you think, Dad? Would you want to visit this place? Just to see what it's like?" I could have ended it right then. Could have told him the truth about what I'd overheard, shown him the evidence of Bella's deception. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed to understand the full scope of her plan, needed to be absolutely certain that Walter would believe me when I finally revealed what his wife was really doing. "If you think it's best," I said quietly, letting my shoulders sag with apparent defeat. Bella's smile was radiant. "I'll call tomorrow and schedule a tour," she said, "just so we can all see what's available." After Walter went to bed that night, I heard Bella on the phone again, talking to the same friend she'd been discussing her plans with before. "It's working perfectly," she whispered. "Roger's getting worse every day, and Walter's finally starting to see that we can't manage this situation on our own. I scheduled a tour of Sunset Manor for next week." She paused, listening to whatever her friend was saying. "The deposit is $15,000, she continued. "But that's nothing compared to what we'll get for this place. I already talked to the real estate agent. He thinks we can close by spring if we price it right." $15,000. A deposit that would come from Walter's hard-earned savings, money he was setting aside for the future, for maybe starting a family someday. Money that Bella was already mentally spending on European vacations and Tuscan villas. "Walter has no idea about the real estate agent," she said with a laugh. "He still thinks we're just exploring options for his father's care. By the time he realizes what's happening, the papers will be signed and we'll be free." Free. As if I were a burden she'd been carrying, a weight dragging down her dreams of wealth and adventure. "The old fool actually asked me to help organize all his important papers," she continued. "Can you believe it? He's literally handing me everything I need to transfer ownership. It's almost too easy." Almost too easy. If only she knew how right she was, just not in the way she thought. I went to bed that night with my mind racing, planning my next moves. Bella thought she was playing chess while I played checkers, but she was about to discover that this old farmer knew a few strategies she'd never considered. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. The day of the sale arrived on a cold January morning. 3 weeks after our visit to Sunset Manor, Bella had orchestrated everything with the precision of a military operation. And I had to admit, even knowing it was all a lie, her performance was almost convincing. I'd spent the previous night in what Bella thought was my final evening in my own home. She'd already packed most of my belongings into cardboard boxes, labeling them with the efficiency of someone who couldn't wait to erase every trace of my presence. Walter had helped reluctantly, his face heavy with guilt every time our eyes met. "It's for the best, Dad," he kept saying, but I could hear him trying to convince himself as much as me. "Sunset Manor's really nice. You'll have people to talk to, activities to keep you busy." I nodded weakly, playing the part of the defeated old man who'd finally accepted his fate. "I know, son, you're just looking out for me." The truth was I'd been busy too. While Bella was planning her deception, I'd been setting up my own. My old friend Tommy Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's son, was a real estate agent who'd grown up on the farm next to ours. When I'd called him 2 weeks earlier and explained what I needed, he'd been shocked by Bella's betrayal but eager to help. "She really thinks she's going to steal your land?" Tommy had asked, his voice tight with anger. "She's convinced she's got it all figured out," I'd replied. "But I need your help to show her just how wrong she is." Tommy had agreed immediately. He'd even suggested bringing in his cousin Danny, who worked at the bank, to help make everything look authentic. By the time we finished planning, we had a scheme that would give Bella exactly what she thought she wanted, right up until the moment it all came crashing down. The buyer arrived at 9 in the morning sharp. Bella had told Walter and me that his name was Mr. Johnson, a developer from Atlanta who was interested in converting the farm into a residential subdivision. What she didn't know was that Mr. Johnson was actually Tommy's brother-in-law, Marcus, who'd agreed to play the role in exchange for helping an old family friend. Marcus looked the part perfectly. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, confident handshake. He even drove a luxury sedan that he'd borrowed from his boss for the occasion. When he walked through my front door, I saw Bella's eyes light up with greed and satisfaction. "Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for coming," she said, her voice warm and professional. "As I mentioned on the phone, we're very motivated to complete this transaction quickly." I watched from my chair in the corner, supposedly too confused to participate in the negotiations. Walter sat beside me, his hand on my shoulder, still struggling with what we were doing. He'd signed the power of attorney papers the week before, giving Bella legal authority to act on my behalf. What he didn't know was that I'd already invalidated those documents through my lawyer, ensuring that any sale based on them would be completely void. "The property is everything you described," Marcus said, spreading survey maps across the dining room table. 300 acres of prime development land, road access, water rights. My investors are very interested. Bella practically purred. "As you can see, the current owner is elderly and needs specialized care. We want to expedite this process so he can get settled in his new facility as soon as possible." The way she talked about me, like I wasn't even in the room, like I was already dead and buried, made my stomach churn. But I forced myself to stay in character, occasionally nodding or mumbling agreement when Walter squeezed my shoulder. "I have the purchase agreement right here," Marcus said, pulling out an official-looking document. $4.2 million, as we discussed. Cash deal, 30-day closing. $4.2 million. $300,000 less than what Bella had originally told her friend the property was worth, but I could see from her expression that she was more than satisfied with the amount. Enough money to pay off her secret debts, buy that villa in Tuscany, and still have millions left over for whatever lifestyle she'd been dreaming about. "That sounds perfect," she said, reaching for the papers eagerly. Walter frowned. "Shouldn't Dad's lawyer look at this first?" Bella's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Honey, you know how confused your father gets these days. His lawyer is just going to ask a bunch of questions that will delay everything. And Mr. Johnson has other properties he's considering. We don't want to lose this opportunity." The manipulation was textbook perfect. Create urgency, minimize outside oversight, appeal to Walter's desire to do what was best for me. If I hadn't known it was all lies, I might have been impressed by her skill. "I understand your concerns," Marcus said to Walter, "but I can assure you this is a standard contract. Fair market value, no hidden clauses. Your father will have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life." What Marcus didn't mention was that the contract was written on letterhead from a fake company, with clauses that would make it legally meaningless, even if I hadn't already protected the property through other means. Danny at the bank had helped us create official-looking documentation that would pass casual inspection but wouldn't hold up to any serious scrutiny. Bella signed the papers with a flourish, her pen moving across the signature lines like she was signing autographs. I made a show of confusion when Walter guided my hand to add my own signature, mumbling about not understanding what was happening. "There," Bella said with satisfaction, gathering the documents. "All finished. When can we expect the funds to be transferred?" Marcus checked his watch. "The money should be in your account by tomorrow afternoon. I'll have my assistant call to confirm when everything's processed." Tomorrow afternoon. Less than 24 hours before Bella would discover that her perfect crime was actually an elaborate trap. After Marcus left, Bella could barely contain her excitement. She spent the rest of the day making phone calls, booking flights, researching luxury hotels in Paris and Rome. I listened from my bedroom as she called the travel agent, her voice bright with anticipation. "We want the best of everything," she was saying. "First-class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours. Money is no object. Money that didn't exist for a sale that never really happened, funded by accounts she had no access to. If the situation hadn't been so serious, it might have been funny." Walter, meanwhile, looked like a man attending his own funeral. He helped me pack the last of my belongings with mechanical movements, his face gray with guilt and sorrow. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said quietly as we folded my work shirts into a suitcase. "I know this isn't what you wanted." "You're doing what you think is best," I replied, patting his hand. "That's all any son can do." The words weren't entirely false. Walter was doing what he thought was best, based on the information Bella had fed him. In a few days, when the truth came out, I hoped he'd understand that sometimes protecting the people you love means deceiving them temporarily. That evening, Bella cooked my farewell dinner with theatrical sadness, sighing dramatically as she served pot roast and mashed potatoes. "I'm going to miss cooking for you, Dad," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Promise me you will eat well at Sunset Manor." "I promise," I said, though what I was really promising was that she'd never get the chance to cook another meal in my kitchen after tomorrow. After dinner, she brought out a bottle of champagne that she claimed was for toasting new beginnings. Walter looked uncomfortable with the celebration, but Bella insisted. "To Dad's bright future," she said, raising her glass, "and to family supporting each other through difficult transitions." I sipped the champagne and watched her face glow with triumph. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully manipulated everyone, stolen millions of dollars, and eliminated the only obstacle to her perfect life. Tomorrow she'd be planning her European adventure with money she believed was already in her account. But tonight, sitting in my own dining room for what she thought was the last time, I allowed myself a small smile. Because while Bella had been planning the perfect crime, I'd been planning the perfect lesson. And tomorrow she was going to learn that underestimating a 63-year-old farmer had been the biggest mistake of her life. The champagne tasted bitter on my tongue, but not because of the wine. It was the taste of betrayal, of watching someone you trusted celebrate the destruction of everything you held dear. But there was something else mixed in with the bitterness, something that made me feel more alive than I had in months. It was the taste of justice waiting just around the corner. After Walter went to bed, I heard Bela on the phone one more time, talking to the same friend she'd been confiding in throughout this whole ordeal. "It's done," she whispered, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "The papers are signed, the money will be in the account tomorrow, and the old man will be out of here by Friday. I can't believe how easy this was." Easy. She had no idea that the real game was just beginning. "Walter's still feeling guilty," she continued, "but he'll get over it once we're spending time on the French Riviera. Amazing how quickly grief fades when you're drinking wine on a yacht." A yacht? She'd already mentally spent not just the money from the fake sale, but was planning a lifestyle that would burn through millions of dollars in a matter of years. Even if the sale had been real, her spending habits would have left Walter broke within a decade. "The best part is, there's nothing Roger can do about it now," she said with a cruel laugh. "The power of attorney is signed, the sale is complete, and by this time tomorrow I'll have access to $4.2 million. That confused old fool handed me everything I needed to take his life away from him." That confused old fool was about to hand her the lesson of a lifetime. And unlike her European vacation plans, this was one trip she was definitely going to take. I fell asleep that night in my own bed for what Bella thought was the last time, but I slept better than I had in weeks, because tomorrow the real show was going to begin. Bella left for Europe on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the fake sale. I'd been officially moved to Sunset Manor 3 days earlier, though in reality I was staying in a guest room at Tommy Patterson's house, watching everything unfold from a safe distance. Walter had driven me to the facility himself, his eyes red from crying as he carried my suitcase to what he thought would be my permanent home. The guilt was eating him alive, but Bella had convinced him it was necessary. "Just until we can figure out a better arrangement," she told him. "Once the estate is settled, maybe we can find Dad a nice private nurse." A private nurse that would never materialize, paid for with money that didn't exist. But Walter didn't know that yet. Bella had withdrawn $50,000 in cash the day after the sale, claiming she needed it for my care expenses and the deposit on our trip. She'd been frustrated that the full amount hadn't appeared in their account yet, but Danny at the bank had fed her a story about large transfers requiring additional processing time. "International regulations," he'd explained over the phone while I listened in, "should be cleared by early next week." By early next week, she'd be sitting in a Paris police station trying to explain how she'd ended up with no money, no return ticket, and a husband who finally understood what kind of woman he'd married. The first call came on Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in Tommy's kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall when my cell phone rang. Walter's name appeared on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By the fifth call, I decided to answer. "Dad?" Walter's voice was strained, frantic. "Dad, where are you? I went to visit you at Sunset Manor, and they said you were never checked in. What's going on?" I'd been expecting this call. The staff at Sunset Manor had been instructed to tell anyone who asked that I'd changed my mind about moving in, that I'd decided to stay with friends instead. It was the first crack in Bella's perfect plan. "I'm fine, son," I said calmly. "I'm staying with Tommy for a while." "But Bella said you were at the facility. She showed me the paperwork, the room assignment, everything." Bella was mistaken about a lot of things. There was a long pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning in Walter's head as he tried to process what I was telling him. "Dad, I don't understand. Where's the money from the farm sale? Bella said it would be in our account by now, but when I checked this morning, there's nothing there." "That's because there was no sale, Walter." Another pause. Longer this time. "What do you mean, no sale?" I took a deep breath. It was time for my son to learn the truth about the woman he'd married. "I mean, your wife has been lying to you about everything. The buyer was fake, the contracts were worthless, and the farm is still mine. It always was." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call might have dropped. Finally, Walter's voice came through, barely above a whisper. "But the papers. She had me sign the power of attorney, which I had revoked through my lawyer before you ever signed it. Walter, I've been aware of Bella's plan from the beginning. I let her think it was working so I could see exactly how far she was willing to go." "I don't understand." His voice was shaking now. Why would she do this? Why would she lie about selling the farm? Because she's been hiding massive debt from you. Credit cards, personal loans, spending money you don't have on a lifestyle you can't afford. She needed the money from the farm to cover what she owed and fund the European vacation she's on right now. Walter was quiet for so long I started to worry about him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. $28,000, he said. What? She told me last month that we had unexpected medical bills, asked me to take out a personal loan for $28,000. Said it was temporary, just until her promotion came through at work. My heart sank. The debt was even worse than I'd thought. Bella hadn't just been planning to steal from me, she'd already been stealing from Walter, using his love and trust to fund her spending habits. Walter, where exactly is Bella right now? Paris. She's supposed to be there for 10 days, then Rome, then Florence. She said it was a girls' trip with her college friends, something she'd been saving up for. Saving up with money that doesn't exist for a trip paid with funds from a farm sale that never happened. I heard Walter's sharp intake of breath as the full reality of his situation hit him. His wife was halfway around the world, spending money they didn't have, based on a lie that was about to explode in spectacular fashion. Dad, what do I do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number had a French country code. Walter, I need to take this. It's probably your wife. I answered the second call, putting it on speaker so Walter could hear. Roger? Bella's voice was shrill, panicked. Roger, what the hell is going on? Hello, Bella. Having a nice time in Paris? Don't play games with me, old man. My credit card was just declined at Galeries Lafayette. The bank says there's no money in any of our accounts. Where's the money from the farm sale? I looked at Walter, saw his face crumple as he heard his wife's true voice for the first time. No sweetness, no concern, just raw fury and entitlement. There is no money, Bella, because there was no sale. The silence that followed was deafening, then an explosion of rage. What are you talking about? I saw the contract, I saw the buyer, I signed the papers myself. You signed fake papers with a fake buyer for a fake sale. Did you really think I was going to let you steal my family's legacy? You crazy old bastard. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm trapped in Paris with no money. Walter stepped closer to the phone, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. Bella, it's me. Her tone changed immediately, becoming pleading and desperate. Walter, honey, thank God. There's been some terrible mistake. Your father is confused. He doesn't understand what's happening. I understand perfectly, Walter said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. You've been lying to me for months. The debt, the medical bills, the promotion that never existed. All lies. Walter, you don't understand. I understand that you tried to steal my father's farm. I understand that you've been spending money we don't have while I work overtime to pay bills that don't exist. I understand that you manipulated me into betraying my own father. Bella's voice became hysterical. This is his fault. He set us up. He made me think the sale was real. You made yourself think the sale was real because you were so focused on stealing from us that you never bothered to verify anything. You were so convinced that you were smarter than everyone else that you walked right into a trap. I'm your wife. You have to help me. Walter looked at me, his face a mixture of pain and determination. When he spoke, his voice was steady. No, Bella, I don't. He hung up the phone. We sat in Tommy's kitchen for a long time, not saying anything. Walter stared out of the window at the snow-covered fields, his whole world reshaping itself around the truth he'd finally been forced to see. How long have you known? He asked eventually. I overheard her on the phone planning the whole thing about 3 months ago. 3 months? He shook his head. You let me go through with it. You let me feel guilty about putting you in that facility, about selling the farm. I had to, Walter. If I'd told you what she was planning, you never would have believed me. You loved her. You trusted her. You needed to see for yourself what kind of person she really was. Walter's phone rang again. Bella's number. He declined the call. It rang again. He declined again. After the 5th attempt, he turned the phone off completely. What happens now? He asked. Now you decide what kind of life you want to live. With or without a woman who was willing to destroy everything you care about for money. Walter nodded slowly, his jaw set with new determination. I already know the answer to that. Over the next few hours, Walter's phone received 37 missed calls from Bella. She left voicemails that progressed from angry demands to desperate pleas to threats to try to guilt him into sending money for her return flight. In one particularly telling message, she screamed, "This is all your father's fault. He's a vindictive old man who can't stand to see us happy. If you don't send me money right now, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of family you really are." Walter listened to each message with growing disgust, finally deleting them all without responding. "She's going to have to figure out her own way home," he said. "What about the debt she's accumulated in your name?" Walter's face hardened. "I'll deal with it. I'll work extra hours, pick up weekend jobs, whatever it takes, but I'm not bailing her out of a mess she created with stolen money." That evening we drove back to the farm together. Walter helped me unpack the belongings that Bella had so eagerly boxed up, hanging my clothes back in my closet, returning my books to their shelves. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said as we worked. "I should have trusted you. I should have seen what she was doing. She was very good at manipulation, son. She used your love for me against you, and your love for her against me. That takes a special kind of cruelty. How could I have been so blind?" I stopped unpacking and looked at my son, seeing the pain and shame in his eyes. "Because you have a good heart, Walter. You believe the best in people until they prove otherwise. That's not something to be ashamed of." As we finished settling me back into my own home, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in months. The farm was safe, my son's eyes were finally open, and somewhere in Paris, Bella was learning that actions have consequences. The phone rang once more that evening. Walter answered it this time. "What do you want, Bella?" Her voice was small now, defeated. "I'm sorry, Walter. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake. You planned to steal from my father and destroy our family. There's a difference." "Please," she whispered. "I love you." Walter looked at me, then back at the phone in his hand. When he spoke, his voice was calm but final. "No, you don't. If you love me, you never could have done what you did. Don't call this number again." He hung up and turned off his phone. In the quiet that followed, I realized that sometimes the most painful lessons are also the most necessary ones. Walter had learned what real betrayal looked like, but he'd also learned what real strength felt like. And Bella, well, she was about to learn that being stranded in a foreign country with no money and no one to call was exactly what happened when you tried to steal from a family that knew how to fight back. Bella didn't come home for 3 weeks. When she finally did, it wasn't because Walter had sent her money or because she'd found her way back on her own. She came back because her sister in Chicago had wired her enough cash for a one-way economy ticket, the kind with middle seats and screaming babies that she would have sneered at just a month earlier. Walter had spent those 3 weeks transforming into someone I barely recognized. The guilt-ridden, uncertain man who'd helped pack my belongings was gone, replaced by someone with steel in his spine and clarity in his eyes. He'd used the time to do more than just unpack my things and settle me back into the farmhouse. He'd been investigating. "Dad, you need to see this," he said one evening, spreading bank statements and credit card bills across my kitchen table. The numbers told a story of financial deception that made my stomach turn. Bella hadn't just hidden $28,000 in debt. The real total was closer to $67,000, spread across 11 different credit cards and 3 personal loans. She'd been living like a millionaire while Walter worked double shifts to pay what he thought were their normal household expenses. "Look at these charges," Walter said, his finger tracing down the statements. $500 at a spa in November, $800 for a purse the same week I had to skip lunch 3 days in a row because money was tight, $1,500 at a jewelry store while she was telling me we couldn't afford to fix the truck. Each revelation was like another knife twist. Bella had been systematically stealing Walter's financial future, one luxury purchase at a time, while playing the role of the supportive wife who only wanted what was best for the family. "The worst part is this," Walter said, pulling out a loan application. "She applied for a home equity loan against the farm 2 months ago. Forged your signature and everything." I stared at the document, seeing my name written, in Bella's careful handwriting. She'd been planning multiple ways to steal from us simultaneously, ensuring that even if one scheme failed, she'd have backup options. "The bank caught the forgery," Walter continued, "but only because a loan officer happened to know you personally and called to confirm. If it had been processed by someone else." She would have mortgaged my family's land to pay for her shopping sprees. I finished. Walter nodded grimly. And when she couldn't make the payments, we would have lost everything anyway. That's when I understood that Bella's plan hadn't just been ambitious, it had been desperate. She wasn't just greedy, she was in over her head, drowning in debt and willing to destroy anyone who could help her stay afloat. The day Bella returned, Walter was ready for her. He'd moved all of his belongings out of their apartment and back to the farm. He'd consulted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Most importantly, he'd changed every password, closed every joint account, and secured every piece of documentation related to the farm. I was in the barn when her car pulled up the driveway, but I could hear her voice carrying across the yard as she got out. Walter, thank God you're here. You have no idea what I've been through." Her performance was Oscar-worthy. Tears, dramatic gestures, the whole production. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she was genuinely distraught rather than furious that her plans had been exposed. Walter met her at the front steps, his face expressionless. "Hello, Bella. Honey, we need to talk. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Your father, he's been filling your head with lies about me." "No lies," Walter said calmly. "Just facts. $67,000 in hidden debt, forged loan applications, a plan to steal my father's farm and abandon him in a nursing home." Bella's face went through a rapid series of changes as she realized her usual manipulation tactics weren't working. Surprise, then calculation, then desperation. "Those debts aren't what you think," she said quickly. "I was trying to surprise you. The money was for investments, for our future." "Investments in designer handbags and spa treatments?" "Walter, please just listen to me. We can work this out. I made some mistakes, but we're married. We are supposed to support each other through difficult times." Walter's laugh was bitter. "Support each other? You mean like how you supported me by lying about every major financial decision for the past year? Or how you supported my father by planning to steal his life's work?" Bella's composure finally cracked. "Your father is a vindictive old man who can't stand to see anyone else have nice things. He set me up. He made me think that sale was real just so he could humiliate me. He gave you exactly what you deserved. I'm your wife," she screamed, her voice echoing across the farmyard. "You took vows, for better or worse, remember?" Walter stepped closer to her, his voice deadly quiet. "I took vows with someone I thought existed, a woman who loved me, who wanted to build a life together, who understood what family meant. That woman was never real, was she?" Bella's face went pale. For a moment the mask slipped completely, and I saw what was underneath. Not love or regret or even genuine sorrow. Just cold calculation as she tried to figure out her next move. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. Walter pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to her. "Divorce papers. I've already filed. You can contest it if you want, but I have documentation of every lie, every hidden debt, every attempt to defraud my family. Your choice is simple. Sign them and walk away, or fight me in court and have all of this become public record." Bella's hands shook as she opened the envelope. "Walter, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Marriage is about forgiveness." "Marriage is about trust," Walter replied. "And you destroyed that the moment you decided my father's suffering was worth less than your vacation plans." She looked around desperately, as if searching for someone else to blame, someone else to manipulate. Her eyes landed on the farmhouse, on the land she'd tried so hard to steal, and her expression hardened into something ugly. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice venomous. "But you're going to regret this, both of you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are." "Go ahead," Walter said. "Tell everyone how you tried to steal from a 63-year-old man and got caught. Tell them how you forged documents and accumulated $67,000 in secret debt. See how much sympathy you get." Bella stared at him for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options. She could fight, drag this out, try to salvage something from the wreckage of her schemes. Or she could cut her losses and disappear before things got worse. "Fine," she said finally, her voice flat and defeated. "But I want my things. Your clothes are in boxes by the door. Everything else stays here since it was bought with money you stole. Those aren't stolen goods. Prove it. Show me receipts proving you paid for them with legitimately earned money." Bella's mouth opened and closed silently. We all knew she couldn't prove any such thing because it wasn't true. Every luxury item she owned had been purchased with Walter's money or borrowed funds she'd never intended to repay. She signed the divorce papers right there on the hood of her car, her signature sharp and angry. When she finished, she threw the pen at Walter's feet and got back in her car without another word. As she drove away, dust swirling in her wake, Walter stood motionless for a long moment. I approached carefully, not sure if he needed space or comfort. "You okay, son?" He turned to me, and I was surprised to see relief in his eyes rather than sadness. "I keep waiting to feel guilty," he said. "Waiting to miss her or regret what just happened. But all I feel is, free." "That's because you just got rid of a weight you didn't even realize you were carrying?" Walter nodded slowly. "How did you know? How did you see what she really was when I couldn't?" I put my hand on his shoulder. "Because I wasn't blinded by love, and because I've had 63 years to learn that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them the first time." That evening we sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the fields gold and orange. It was the first peaceful moment we'd shared in months. The first time we could just enjoy each other's company without the shadow of Bella's manipulation hanging over us. "What happens to her debt?" Walter asked. "That's her problem now. You weren't legally responsible for debts she accumulated without your knowledge, especially through fraud." "And the farm?" I smiled. "The farm stays right where it's always been. In our family, where it belongs." Walter was quiet for a while, processing everything that had happened. Finally, he spoke again. "I want to learn, Dad. Really learn this time. How to run this place, how to make it profitable, how to be the kind of man who deserves to inherit something like this." "You already are that man," I told him. "You proved it today when you chose doing what was right over what was easy." As the stars came out overhead, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. The farm was safe. My son was finally free from a toxic marriage, and we had time to rebuild what Bella had tried to destroy. Somewhere out there, she was probably already planning her next scheme, looking for her next victim. But that was no longer our problem. She'd learned that stealing from our family came with consequences, and Walter had learned that some people will smile at your dinner table while planning to stab you in the back. Most importantly, we'd both learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about loyalty, trust, and the willingness to fight for the people you love. And sometimes it's about the wisdom to know when someone has forfeited their right to call themselves family at all. 6 months after Bella disappeared from our lives, Walter and I were sitting in Dr. Martinez's office for my regular checkup. The doctor smiled as he reviewed my test results, shaking his head with the kind of amazement reserved for medical mysteries. "Roger, I have to ask," he said, setting down his clipboard. "What exactly have you been doing? Your blood pressure is better than it's been in 5 years. Your cholesterol levels have improved significantly, and your arthritis symptoms seem to have almost disappeared." Walter and I exchanged glances. How could we explain that the absence of a manipulative daughter-in-law had been better medicine than anything you could get from a pharmacy? "I've been working the farm again," I said simply. "Staying active, eating home-cooked meals, getting plenty of fresh air." What I didn't mention was that I'd also been sleeping through the night for the first time in months, no longer waking up worried about what scheme Bella might be plotting or how much deeper Walter was sinking into her web of lies. The truth was, getting my life back had restored more than just my peace of mind. It had given me a sense of purpose I'd forgotten I still had. Walter and I were working the land together now, really working it, not just maintaining it until someone could steal it away. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up," Dr. Martinez said. "You're healthier now than men half your age." As we drove home from the appointment, Walter seemed thoughtful. He'd been quiet for most of the past week, ever since the divorce had been finalized and Bella had officially become part of our past. "Something on your mind, son?" "I've been thinking about what the doctor said, about you being healthier now." Walter pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. "I realize I haven't thanked you properly for what you did." You don't need to thank me for protecting my own family. But I do that. If you hadn't figured out what Bella was planning, if you hadn't been smart enough to set that trap," he shook his head, "I would have lost everything. My inheritance, my family history, my relationship with you. She would have taken it all." It was true, though I hadn't liked thinking about it in such stark terms. Bella's plan hadn't just been about stealing money. It had been about erasing me from Walter's life completely. Once I was tucked away in that nursing home and the farm was sold, how long would it have been before her visits stopped? How long before Walter convinced himself that his confused, helpless father was better off forgotten? "The scary part is how close she came to succeeding," Walter continued. "If you hadn't overheard that phone call." "But I did hear it, and we stopped her." "We," Walter repeated, smiling slightly. "I like the sound of that." Over the past 6 months, we had become the foundation of everything we did. We planned crop rotations together, researched new farming techniques together, made financial decisions together. Walter had thrown himself into learning the business with the dedication of someone making up for lost time. He'd also thrown himself into making amends for the money Bella had stolen. Even though he wasn't legally responsible for her debts, he'd insisted on paying back every penny she'd charged to credit cards in his name. It meant extra work, longer hours, and a lifestyle simpler than what Bella had convinced him they could afford. But Walter approached it with determination rather than resentment. "I want to start clean," he'd told me when he'd outlined his repayment plan. "No debt, no lies, no complications. Just honest work and honest money." It was a philosophy that served him well. By living within his means and focusing on what really mattered, Walter had discovered a contentment that had eluded him during his marriage. He looked healthier too, less stressed, more confident in his own judgment. "I heard from Tommy Patterson today," I said as we walked toward the house. "Bella tried to contact him about getting another real estate agent to help her sell some property she claims to own in Florida." Walter stopped walking. "She doesn't own any property in Florida." Tommy figured as much. Apparently she's been trying to run the same con on other people, claiming she has land to sell and looking for buyers willing to pay upfront deposits. Is she succeeding? Not so far. Word has gotten around about what happened here. The real estate community is pretty tight-knit, and nobody wants to risk their reputation getting involved with someone known for fraud. Walter was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Part of me feels like I should warn people about her. And the other part? The other part thinks people need to learn to protect themselves, just like we did. It was a mature response and exactly what I'd hoped to hear. Walter wasn't trying to rescue Bella from the consequences of her actions, wasn't taking responsibility for problems she'd created herself. He'd learned the difference between helping someone and enabling someone. That evening we were working in the barn when a car pulled up the driveway. I didn't recognize the vehicle, a small silver sedan that looked like it might be a rental. My first thought was that Bella had returned, but the woman who got out of the car was a stranger. She was probably in her 40s, professionally dressed, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was here on business she didn't particularly want to conduct. "Mr. Holloway?" she asked, approaching cautiously. "Roger Holloway." "That's me. What can I do for you?" "My name is Sandra Pierce. I'm an investigator with the fraud division of the state attorney's office." She pulled out a badge and identification. "I was wondering if I could speak with you about your daughter-in-law, Bella Holloway." Walter and I exchanged glances. We'd been expecting something like this eventually. Bella's schemes were bound to catch up with her sooner or later. "Former daughter-in-law," Walter corrected. "The divorce was finalized last month." "I see. May I ask why you divorced?" "Because she tried to steal my father's farm through fraud and deception," Walter said bluntly. "Among other things." Miss Pierce nodded as if she'd been expecting that answer. "We've received multiple complaints about Miss Holloway attempting to sell properties she doesn't own, forging signatures on legal documents, and accepting money for transactions that never materialize." "How many complaints?" I asked. 17 so far, though we suspect there are more victims who haven't come forward yet. The total amount of money involved is approaching $200,000. $200,000. In the 6 months since leaving our farm, Bella had managed to escalate her criminal activities to the point where federal investigators were involved. It was both shocking and completely predictable. "What do you need from us?" Walter asked. "Primarily, we need you to testify about what happened here. Your case is particularly important because it shows a pattern of behavior and because you have documentation of her methods." We spent the next hour going through the details of Bella's attempted fraud, providing Miss Pierce with copies of the forged power of attorney, the fake sale documents, and evidence of the hidden debts. It was painful to relive, but also cathartic in a way. Each piece of evidence we provided was another nail in the coffin of Bella's criminal enterprise. "Will she go to prison?" Walter asked when we finished. "If we can prove our case, yes. This level of financial fraud typically carries a sentence of 5 to 10 years, plus restitution to the victims." 5 to 10 years? It seemed like a long time, but when I thought about all the families Bella had probably destroyed, all the elderly people she'd likely targeted because she thought they'd be easy marks, it didn't seem long enough. After Miss Pierce left, Walter and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset, just as we'd done the night Bella signed the divorce papers. The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. "Do you think she'll actually serve time?" Walter asked. "I think she'll try to manipulate her way out of it right up until the moment they lock the cell door. And if she does go to prison, then maybe she'll have time to think about the choices that led her there." Walter was quiet for a long time, staring out at the fields we'd planted together that spring. Corn was growing tall and green, promising a harvest that would belong entirely to us, with no debt or deception clouding our ownership. "I used to think I knew what success looked like," he said finally. "Big house, expensive car, designer clothes, exotic vacations, all the things Bella wanted. And now? Now I think success looks like this. Land that belongs to your family, work that has meaning, people you can trust." He gestured toward the farmhouse where warm light glowed in the kitchen windows. "Dinner waiting on the table that you can afford to buy with money you honestly earned." "That's exactly what success looks like," I agreed. As if summoned by his words, the smell of pot roast drifted across the evening air. Walter had become an excellent cook over the past few months, taking pride in preparing simple, hearty meals that tasted infinitely better than anything Bella had ever made. "Speaking of dinner," he said, standing up and stretching, "I should check on that roast." "Walter?" He turned back toward me. "I'm proud of you, son, not just for how you handled the situation with Bella, but for the man you've become since then." Walter's smile was warm and genuine, free of the stress and uncertainty that had clouded his features during his marriage. "I'm proud of us, Dad. We make a pretty good team." As we walked into the house together, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with successfully outmaneuvering Bella. It came from knowing that my son and I had not only survived her betrayal, but had emerged stronger because of it. The farm would continue for another generation, just as it had for more than a century. Walter would raise his own children here someday, teaching them the same lessons about hard work, honesty, and family loyalty that had been passed down through our bloodline. And somewhere, perhaps in a prison cell, Bella would have plenty of time to think about the life she could have had if she'd chosen love over greed, family over money, truth over deception. But that was no longer our concern. We'd learned what we needed to learn, protected what we needed to protect, and built something better from the ashes of her betrayal. The rest was up to her.